Hey everyone, I'm Mike Kazimer. We're here today to take a look at the brand new Forbidden Dreadnought. This bike is the second model from Forbidden. You might remember the Druid that came out a couple years ago. That was their trail bike, 130 millimeters, and kind of made waves because of a suspension design. High single pivot suspension design, something we typically see more on downhill bikes and longer travel machines. So when they entered the market with that Druid, people took notice. But now, the follow-up act is this thing. Like I said, the Dreadnought, 154 millimeters of rear travel, paired with a 170 millimeter fork up front, and it comes with 29-inch wheels, or you can get what they call their Ziggy Link. It's a little aftermarket, lower shock link, and that allows you to run a 27.5-inch wheel if you want to go that mullet or mixed wheel size route. What exactly is a Dreadnought? Well, the name comes from the early 1900s. It was a type of battleship. Tons of armor, tons of guns, kind of changed the game as far as seagoing warfare goes. So anyway, it's kind of a big brute of a battleship, and Forbidden thought it would be an appropriate name for a bike. I also thought it'd be an appropriate name for a metal band. Turns out I wasn't the only one thinking that. Did some Googling. There's a few metal bands with that name, but no bikes with that name yet, except for this one here. Who's the Dreadnought for? Well, Forbidden have refrained from actually saying exactly what type of bike this is. They say you could use it as a long travel trail bike if you'd like. You could use it as an enduro race bike. You could even use it in the bike park or for some kind of more downhill oriented riding. The frame's even dual crown fork approved, so you can stick maybe a 180 mil dual crown on there and probably have a pretty good time. So it's up to you to decide what this bike's for and where it should be ridden. At the moment, the Dreadnought is only available as a frame and shock only. Complete bikes are coming, but those are gonna be a little bit further down the line. As you know, this last year has been pretty crazy as far as supply goes. And so the complete bikes, we'll probably see those in the summertime, but for now, frames are available and they come with either an EXT coil shock or a Push 11.6 coil shock. Now those are both pretty expensive options as far as shocks go, so that means that the total price, it's not cheap. With the EXT shock, it goes for $4,049, and with a push shock, $4,249 for frame and shock. Eventually, you'll be able to get the frame with a Float X2 shock, and that'll drop the price down to $3,499 for the frame and shock. This bike here, it's the XT Complete version. Like I said, available in the summer, and that's gonna go for $6,499. It's an SLX version as well, but again, those are a little further down the line. For right now, we'll just be kind of focusing on the frame itself, as well as the geometry. Speaking of geometry, this bike here is a size large, and it has a 63.5 degree head tube angle, 484 millimeter reach, and 450 millimeter chain stays. Now the chain stays, or more accurately, the rear center length of the bikes changes depending on the size. So size small, it has 422 millimeter chain stays, all the way up to size XL, which has 462 millimeter chain stays. Basically, Forbidden wanted to make sure that the bikes have the same balance across all sizes. That way you don't end up with a bike that's super long in the front, super short in the back, or super short in the front, super long in the back. So nice to see them doing that. It's a trend that's starting to catch on, but not all companies take the effort to adapt the chainstay length depending on frame size. Might as well mention the seat tube angle. It's 76.1 degrees on the size large, and it actually steepens a little bit for the XL, just in order to make sure that those taller riders don't end up too far over the back wheel while climbing. The overall shape of the Dreadnought frame closely resembles that of the Druid, but this one's been tested to downhill bike standards. Forbidden knew that riders are going to be taking this bike and pushing it as hard as they could, so they want to make sure it was as tough as possible. As far as little frame details go, you've got 12x148 boost rear spacing, you have threaded bottom bracket, internal cable routing through the top tube. You also have a chain guide with an upper and lower guide, something we don't see quite as often, but given the bike's suspension layout, this just helps make sure that that chain doesn't bounce off. A little extra retention. There's also a small rear fender to help mud and grit from getting tossed at that shock. And then there's plenty of room for a water bottle inside the front triangle, one of those must-have features these days. Now let's talk about that suspension design. As I mentioned, it's a high single pivot layout with an idler pulley to help deal with the amount of chain growth that happens with that type of design. But basically, when that rear wheel hits a bump, it's moving backwards, a total of 30 millimeters by the time it goes through all 154 millimeters of travel. So completely rearward, where we see some bikes, they go rearward and then they start moving forward. So all kinds of axle paths out there. This one, pretty much rearward the entire way. According to Owen Pemberton, the bike designer, he thinks that that helps the rear wheel match the movement of the front wheel. So you think of what your front wheel is doing when it hits a bump, it's kind of moving that way in line with the head angle. And so this way, the rear wheel kind of on the same plane. So he thinks that that helps the bike just really smooth out those bumps and stay predictable through super choppy, chunky terrain. This bike was obviously designed with an eye toward the descents, but Forbidden didn't forget about the pedaling performance. One of the nice things about the idler pulley, It gives them some room to kind of really tweak the anti-squat values as they'd like. The Dreadnought's anti-squat values sit around 115 to 120% at sag. Basically, that's designed to help keep the bike nice and calm and stable when you're pedaling, even when you're out of the saddle, really mashing on the pedals. That's kind of why they went with a little bit above 100%. That just helps make it more resistant to those changes when your center of gravity moves from right above the seat to in front of the seat. So moderately high anti-squat values to ensure that the bike pedals well to accompany those descending characteristics. Well, what's it like to ride the Dreadnought? Well, the good news is, it doesn't feel like a big, unwieldy battleship of a bike, no matter what the name implies. It feels large, you don't think that it's a XC bike or anything like that, but it's not lazy, and that's the good news. You might expect longer chain stays, slack head angle. It's gonna just be a big tank unless you're on the steepest trails around. That's not the case. I was actually probably most impressed by the way that it could jump, because typically with this style of bike, I found that a high single pivot just wants to stay stuck to the ground. Sometimes it really feels like you need to force it to get off the lip of a jump. But in this one, ran the rebound a little quicker than I might normally, and really had a good time on machine-made jump trails. And then I could just hop over to a natural rough track the next second and enjoy the way that rear wheel just gets up and out of the way. So pretty fun coming to terms with this bike. Still need to get more hours on it to really get some final verdicts. I'd like to know how it stacks up against a non-high single pivot bike with similar travel. That's gonna have to wait into the future. This bike unfortunately has to go back to the mothership, limited supply and all that, but we will get one in later in the year so I can do a full long-term review, really put it through its paces. But I would say, initial impressions, feels a lot like that Druid that I enjoyed when I reviewed it previously, but with more travel. Hop off. And another thing I should mention is just how well this bike lands. Coming off a drop or a jump, when you land on the ground, it just feels like it sits and just stays calm, lets you keep tracking forward. So a lot of cool traits here. Like I said, we'll get one in and really put it to the test later on this year. That's it for the Forbidden Dreadnought. Hope you found that interesting. Stay tuned for plenty more tech content and other videos from Pinkbike. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.